All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick will be looking at our Week 4 predictions. Top to bottom, pretty interesting slate in college football, as it always is here at the tail end of September, as most teams dive into conference play. And kicking things off, Clemson takes on Wake Forest in Winston-Salem. This is a ranked matchup between two undefeated ACC schools. Very lopsided rivalry. Since Dabo Swinney took over in 2009, he's won 13 straight. Only one of those games was decided by single-digit points. I mean, he's got 60-point wins, 50-point wins, you name it in this series, Nick. It's been complete domination by Clemson in this group. And then last year, a lot of people were picking Wake to win this game. I did not. I picked Clemson, and they blew them out 48-27. Wake gets them again here. Big-time opportunity. This will really, it's going to dictate somebody's playoff hopes because, Clemson's schedule, of course, from a strength standpoint, isn't phenomenal. Same for Wake, but, this is an opportunity to pick up a ranked win. I think this is going to be a very great game. Look at last year, the running game completely dominated. Tony Elliott, he was not a great play caller at times last year, but he knew the game plan last year. He stuck right to it. They ran it 30 straight times at one point, I believe. Will Shipley and Kobe Paisley turned it on, tore them apart. Kobe Pace has not gotten a lot of touches this year. It's really been the Will Shipley show, though, Nick. 249 yards and 6 touchdowns rushing, 7.8 yards per attempt almost. I expect him to, have 200-plus yards, score a handful of touchdowns. He's going to be the man on Saturday. Is this Wake Forest defense, even though they have a pretty respectable D-line, guys like Joshi Jones and whatnot, a very interesting group of players for them, but I don't expect them to be able to defend the run that well. I do think that Kobe Turner is very solid. Rondell Bothroyd was a heck of a defensive lineman for him. Ja'Cory Johns as well. They have very good players on this D-line, some nice depth, but it's a young linebacking core that I expect to struggle. Chase Jones, he's one of those guys that's going to have to step up and be great, but Ryan Smenda is really the only veteran here. He's going to know what to look for, but overall, I just don't see them being able to contain the run in this ball game. Even if Clemson's one-dimensional, I just do not think that they're going to be up to the challenge of slowing them down, and they kind of struggled last week against Liberty, allowing 175 yards on the ground. So, what do you expect from this Clemson offense? Because I think they're going to have a field day, but I would not be, really shocked if they do struggle in the trenches a good bit.
As much as Clemson's offense is one-dimensional, I think that one dimension this week is going to be really highlighted. Will Shipley's having a good season so far. Solid numbers, 32 carries, 249 yards, plus 6 touchdowns. I expect him to have a ton of yards on the ground this weekend. He's really, that star back for Clemson. He's really the lifeblood of this offense, considering DJ has just really kind of underperformed so far. Not terrible this season, but just not really living up to expectations. 57 of 88, 662 for 5 touchdowns and interception. Want to see him trying to pass the ball a little bit more, but the play calling, interesting to see what they kind of roll with this week, considering how well it worked against Wake last time. This game is in Winston-Salem, so I think that definitely is why the line might be a little bit closer, 7 points currently to Clemson. I think they cover that line and win this game. This is a big opportunity for Clemson. Their schedule, they get a lot of hate for it. It wasn't great out of conference, bit weak schedule put all together. This is a real opportunity to pick up a huge win against a ranked team and cement themselves as a playoff favorite.
DJ Uyunglele, like you said, 210 pass yards in the opener. 231, then 221 the next 2 games. So pretty consistent effort from him in terms of, production. 2 touchdowns each in the last 2 games. They only had about 13 points against LA Tech at the half. I'm pretty sure that was the number, and they pulled away. They scored 48, averaging over 41 per contest so far this year. And obviously the competition hasn't been great, but I'll take that number considering how poor they were last year because they only had, I think it was 14 points or I think maybe less than that against Georgia Tech last season. So they opened up with 41, dropped 48 last week. I know I'm kind of babying the offense because they should be doing a lot better, but coming into the year, we kind of expected them to struggle because of, questions at QB, wide receiver as well. Dakari Collins, I hear, is no longer with the program. Bo Collins, though, has emerged as a leading receiver. Antonio Williams stepping up as a freshman. Joseph Nagati, 15 different guys have caught balls this season. Davis Allen's only got 5 receptions. EJ Williams with only 4. So we're still trying to I don't know what they're doing. I think really the process is they're just giving everybody an opportunity to see who steps up and earns their playing time. And this is another big opportunity to do so. They're facing a talented secondary. Kalen Carlson's the leader back there for the Demon Deacons. But this is a team that does not cover very well, and they never really have. Kobe Davis, another one. They always seem to have some nice playmakers. Year after year, they typically have, one of the top marks in the conference for interceptions. But they don't cover very well. They allow a lot of yards. I do think you can expect some nice, healthy balance for Clemson, as long as they don't turn over the ball. The biggest thing, though, that's going to keep Wake Forest in this game is obviously Sam Hartman. He came back, and he's been great in 2 games, 300-plus in both contests, 7 touchdowns, 2 picks. So, obviously, he's still struggling when turning the ball over. But Hartman, he can really light it up. He understands this offense better than anybody. He's got so much time and experience in this system. A.T. Perry, one of the nation's best receivers. They're happy to have Green back. Those two both have, second team high marks and receptions. Taylor Morton, he's got 13. Then Keyshawn Williams is a big playmaker for them. So they have 4 really good wide receivers with a great quarterback. So I do think this passing attack, they have the opportunity week in and week out to do damage, but they're facing a nasty defensive line. Brian Brissy, he's coming back for this one. Rest in peace to his sister Ella for passing, unfortunately. But this is a loaded defensive line for Clemson. And the Wake Forest offensive line has really struggled. They're only 128 rushing yards per game this far. And, last week, 21 yards rushing on 26 attempts against Liberty. Now you face the nation's best defensive line. Obviously, the passing attack can do damage, but they're not going to have any time to do so, at least in my estimation. What do you feel and how's it go? Because that O-line is going to dictate everything for this offense.
Right. Hartman's looked good so far coming back from injury. I'm really glad he's back and playing. I think everyone in the college football community is happy that he's healthy and playing football again for Wake Forest. But the running game just has been great. Leading running back Turner has 31 carries for 149 yards and 2 touchdowns. The line has been sloppy. Really, no production for this Wake Forest offensive line. And with how strong and how powerful this Clemson defensive line is, I expect him to get after Sam Hartman all day and make him uncomfortable, which I think is really the big problem here for Wake Forest. They're going to struggle to defend the run. They're going to struggle to run the ball themselves. I think those are the two keys for this game on Saturday. Around the pocket all night and just not find that rhythm, uncomfortable here and make it a bit easier for Clemson to win this game.
All night? Well, it is a 12 p.m. game, but it's going to feel like a long day, and it probably will be night by the time Hartman's done running around. Miles Murphy, KJ Henry, 2 more guys coming off the edge. They're just absolutely stacked. Prediction for me, I'll go 45-21 Clemson. I think the running game will be too much. The defense is going to force some turnovers. Hartman's going to try to do too much, and he's way too turnover prone. I think 3 picks is appropriate for him. Handful of sacks for the big guys up front. I think Trenton Simpson will give some headaches off the edge as well. That's going to be the pick for me. How you feeling, Nick? You think Wake can pull the upset, or are you on par with me?
I think Sam Hartman will not have the worst day, but I think he'll make some crucial mistakes late in the game, and Clemson will pull away to win by 15 points and cover the 7-point spread.
Leads us to another game on ESPN2 at 12 Eastern Time. Iowa State, they host Baylor. Now, this is a great rivalry. Every year it seems they switch back and forth who wins, but it's very close every single year. 2.5-point line in favor of the Cyclones, 45.5 over under. BYU topped the Bears in double overtime 2 weeks ago. Other than that, they've been pretty flawless. For week 1, Texas State, they had no problems with them. Iowa State, they finally got over the hump and beat Iowa 10-7 in a defensive slugfest. The biggest thing for Iowa State, well, I really want to start with Baylor because the only part of this football team's really impressive is the trenches. I think a lot of people are kind of overrating Baylor maybe a little bit because I don't think they have the athleticism they have last year, wide receiver or in the secondary. Blake Shapen's still very young. He was very good last year in his limited appearances, but he's still very young. He's got, single-figure starts. I do think the potential for him is sky high. He's very accurate. He's a bit of a gamer. 535 yards and 4 touchdowns so far. A game against BYU, he completed about 65%, but only had 137 yards per attempt wise. He wasn't all that great. I think Iowa State, biggest thing for them is you got to live and die in the trenches when you're playing Baylor this year, and I think they can certainly do that. When you talk about lack of playmakers, Monterey Baldwin, I'm not sure what his health status is because I don't think he played last week against Texas State. But this is a guy that they need on the field. He does a lot for them. He was phenomenal in the opener. Talk about him a lot in the offseason. 5'9", 164. They need him on the field. He's a heck of a playmaker. Hal Presley's one of those veterans. The running game, they got things going against the BYU. Richard Reese, Craig Williams, Tay McWilliams. They're pretty deep at that position. They're not really worried about it. But BYU did hold them in check. 52 carries, 152 yards. They've been great against the other 2 opponents, but those don't really count. I do think guys like Will McDonald, Orion Vance, there's only 3 returning veterans on this defense because they replaced everybody, Anthony Johnson being one of them. And obviously, Iowa has probably the worst offense in the Power 5, let's be honest. But still, I do think that's impressive for a team like this. It only has 3 stars and only gave up 7 points. It's slightly impressive. Don't quote me on anything there, but I do think that's a very interesting mark for them. And this defense is starting to play very well, it seems, through 3 games. So I think Iowa State, biggest thing for me is how will they do up front against, Jackson player, Ika, Gabe Hall, a nasty Baylor defensive line. They got 4 or 5 seniors up front in their own right. So I think they're going to be able to hold their own. We'll see how they run the ball. Darrell Brock, he's the guy taking over the next one in the backfield, after following in the footsteps of 2 NFL running backs. He's going to be a big part of this offense. He's going to get plenty of touches. Have not seen much of Henry Deckers this year. 8 touchdowns, 3 picks, 250 yards per game. I've not seen Iowa State play yet this year, so I'm not sure what he can bring to the table. But from what I've seen on the stat sheet, completing 75%. He looks like he held his own against Iowa too. Completed 66%, had 2 picks. But I know Xavier Hutchinson had a big day. So, they're obviously getting the ball to their playmakers. Hutchinson has 28 receptions and 5 touchdowns, actually. 100-plus yards per game right now he's averaging. I do want to see him dish it out to Jalen Noel more. His yards per attempt average only 6.4 yards per catch. That's not great. Sean Shaw's a veteran. He should get the ball some more too. And I think that they can really take advantage if they can protect up front of a secondary that lacks athleticism. What are you looking for in this game, Nick? Because it's going to be a close fourth quarter contest, a low score.
I think this will be a low-scoring game, but I think both these offenses have some potential. I think Deckers has been having a solid year, a bit under the radar. A lot of people haven't really seen what he's been doing at Iowa State. 8 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 745 yards. A solid completion percentage as well. I like him in the pocket. Looks controlled, looks composed. Xavier Hutchinson, of course, is a weapon you want to have if you're a quarterback. 28 receptions, 319 yards, 5 touchdowns. Solid numbers from the wide receiver. We highlighted him in the preseason. He's really talented. And this Baylor team, they just didn't really live up to the hype at BYU. I know it went to overtime, but they really should have won that game. And struggled a little bit here and there. They made some mistakes that cost them that night. I just think that they got to run the ball if they want to win this game against Iowa State. I really like what they have with Ryan Reese. He's a super talented back. 39 carries, 237 yards, 5 touchdowns for Reese so far this season. Want to see him be involved, get a lot of the load early on, and kind of ground and pound and grind down this Iowa State team. Yes, they looked okay against Iowa last week, but Iowa's offense is just absolutely atrocious. You really can't judge anything off that. This could be a big win for Baylor because the loss to BYU definitely hurt their standing in the national, sort of scheme. They fell at number 17 in the nation. They need a big win here to get back on track, kind of build up that momentum in the Big 12. Because they still have the opportunity to be one of the favorites in the Big 12, win this conference. They can put it all together. Shapins looks
not a lot of mistakes from him other than a couple in the
BYU game. I like him as a quarterback. He's a bit young. He's getting a lot of experience, though. I like this game overall. I think it'll be low scoring, but I think Baylor will find a way to win this game.
Iowa State run defense has been elite, 5th nationally, only 60 yards. The biggest thing I do want to go back to, those the offensive line for the Cyclones. They only allowed 1 sack and 3 tackles. The defense, that's very impressive stuff. And this is a veteran line led by Trevor Downing, Daryl Simmons. Those two on the interior will be great. Jake Remsburg, another veteran there at tackle. Those guys, I think that's obviously going to be the key. Is how they can, protect and run the ball. Baylor, same goes for them, though. They got a bunch of seniors, guys like Jacob Gall and Connor Galvin. I love them on the offensive line. But BYU kind of held them in check. BYU, they just got flamed by Oregon, so maybe that was kind of a little bit fluky there. Maybe that's, the lack of beef in the backfield with, their top 2 rushers departing, maybe catching up to them. True freshman Richard Reese is their leading running back, that is. So I do think this is going to be a great game. Low scoring for 4 quarters. I'd be shocked if it's anything else. I'm going to take Will McDonald to make some plays off the edge. I think the secondary, despite being very young, they're not going to be tested all that much. I don't see that threat from Baylor, deep downfield. I think Iowa State's going to win this one. I'm going to go 24-20. I think the Cyclones will protect the football, defend the run very well, play the field position game. Other people, of course, like to say things about the Big 12 when they don't play defense. These teams do, though. That's one thing that's for sure. I think this will be Iowa State. For me, you pick Baylor. What's your score on this one?
I'm going to take Baylor 20-14. I think they just have enough on offense to get that last touchdown in there. I think they'll have a good day running. I know that Iowa State has a great run defense, but I think they'll have an opportunity to pick up some good ground game this game and be able to grind out this tough win against Iowa State.
One other thing I said earlier, but I'm going to refer to it real quick, is just a young secondary. It lacks a lot of athleticism compared to last year. They do have those veterans in Christian Morgan and Al Walcott back, but they do have a lot of playmaking that's missing from last season. I do think this receiving core can take advantage of that, especially with an O-line I expect to protect quite well. Looking at 3:30 on CBS, Florida versus Tennessee. We already talked about this one extensively. Link will be down below. Anthony Richardson, this passing game that has incredibly struggled so far, heads to take on a secondary that was one of the nation's worst a season ago. That's a big thing to watch because that's great. You want to take advantage of your opponent's weaknesses, but Florida I don't think is capable of doing that. Ricky Pearsall, he game 1 against Utah kind of emerged as a type receiver. Hasn't been very productive since. Richardson has just been, flat out awful. 53% completion rate, no touchdowns through the air, only 141 yards per game. He just, week 1 he seemed very comfortable, but they were also, playing a lot of man coverage. The pass rush did not show up for Utah. It was a very easy day. Made plays with his leg. One thing I talked about in the offseason, Nick, is his turnovers are awful, and that continues to be the trend here. Threw a pick 6 right to the defender at Kentucky. Threw a pick in the red zone when they're losing late against USF. It's just been very sloppy from Richardson, and the running game is phenomenal, so they should be able to execute play action more than you've been seeing, but they're really not been able to do that. Montrell Johnson, Trevor Etienne stepping up and giving them good production. Naquan Wright still in the backfield, running behind guys like Cyrus Torrance, who's been great after his transfer over from ULL. The running game's going to have to be great here for Florida. They face, guys like Byron Young, Tyler Barron coming off the edge who have yet to really, unleash a veteran linebacking core of guys like Jeremy Banks. I think this is a tough matchup for Florida. I do think Tennessee rather, is going to step up to slow down this run and make Richardson beat them. And one thing you said is that I don't think that they can play from behind on the road with this passing game. I think you're spot on with that. I do think the Florida defense will be up for the challenge. Guys like Irvin Dexter, Desmond Watson's really stepped up. Ventrell Miller, the sideline guy. Got Jason Marshall and Trey Dean in the secondary. This is a very talented defense that's certainly going to play hard. But I do think as the game grinds down, we look at Utah late in that second half. They're really getting grinded down against the run. USF all day long last week had field day. I think they almost ran for 300 yards on the Gators. So I think that the tempo and the bounce here from Tennessee is going to be too much. It's going to start to wear these guys down. Cedric Tillman, he's still questionable for this one, but I do think Jalen Hyatt and Brooke McCoy, they're more than capable of stepping up. Hendon Hooker's going to be highly efficient in this game. And I do think that the Volunteers, they're going to cover this line here. I think it's about 7 points for Tennessee. It's up to 10.5 now, actually. 62.5 over under. I think Tennessee's going to cover that. I see them winning this game by at least 17. Just because I think the defense is going to get worn down. The offense, they're going to be on the sideline a lot because they're going to keep making mistakes or going 3 and out. It's going to be a big difference maker. Tennessee, for me, I know you have the Volunteers, but why do you feel like Tennessee will win this one with ease?
Yeah, I have the Volunteers simply because I think the point I made in the video we did previously, if Florida finds itself behind on the road early on, I just don't think Anthony Richardson has the skill set to throw the ball and get his team back into the game. He has 4 interceptions already this season. I think he'll be, have at least 2 or 3 if they have to throw the ball. This team is great if they have a lead. They can run the ball, focus on that. Montreal Johnson's having a good season so far, but when this team finds itself in a hole, they get uncomfortable, and Richardson just makes mistakes. You saw it against USF. You saw it against Kentucky. He got uncomfortable in the pocket, made mistakes, and they probably should have lost at USF. That missed field goal. So I really think that Tennessee, as long as they can score early, be efficient, have that great tempo. Hendon Hooker's been great this season. I love the stats on him. 844 yards, 6 touchdowns for him. As long as the tempo is there, I think Tennessee should win this game with ease. It's going to be loud in Neyland. They are very excited for this game. Game day is showing up. This is the whole 9 yards on Rocky Top this weekend. I expect them to cover the spread. I have them at 35-20 is the win for UT. That should cover the 10.5 point spread. This will definitely be an interesting game to watch if Florida can kind of get comfortable early and run the ball, but otherwise Tennessee should run away easily.
That'll definitely knock them into the top 10. Tennessee, legit contender in the East this season. I want to look at Tennessee and Texas Tech real quick. I picked the Red Raiders to win this game in the preseason. Texas, though, I think their defense looked really good against Alabama. That's kind of made me reverse course because I expected, this high-flying Texas Tech attack, coached by Zach Kitley to kind of, wear down a Texas defense. I didn't think it would be great, and I do think that's still possible because they still have the same issues despite a great showing in week 2. Don't have much of a pass rush in terms of depth and, skill, or, size isn't great. Alfred Collins is like defensive end. This is a defense that they obviously look really good. Only allowed 20 points. UTSA pulled away in that one. So, back-to-back games they only allowed 20 points. So this defense is playing really good for Texas. Demarion Overshone, phenomenal player. The secondary has really been shocking. Those guys have been, last year was a big issue with them. They couldn't get the safeties downhill in the box. Couldn't really cover all that well. That hasn't been an issue so far this year. So the Texas secondary is really impressed. I do think the tempo can certainly, and the quick nature of this offense can certainly give them problems because Donovan Smith's been pretty solid, and guys like Bradley have been getting involved in the wide receiver, Jeremiah Bradley that is, and then Taj Brooks, he's a heck of a running back. So I think the offense can certainly compete in this game, especially being at home. I'm gonna take Texas though to win it 30-24, kind of reversing course. I just think the offense for Texas can win yours, who was expected to be back on the sideline. Pretty quick recovery there. I think they're going to finally get Bijan Robinson going, even though the Texas Tech run defense has been pretty good to start the season. I think the balance here, the speed, the playmaking, will be a little bit too much for him. Xavier Worthy as well. That's a guy that was having a field day against Alabama as well. Texas defense, improvement. Texas offense, balance and skill, I think are going to reign supreme in this one. But I would not be shocked one bit if Texas Tech wins it. How do you see this game going, Nick?
I'm going to take Texas as well. They really did impress me against Alabama. I was there in the stadium that day. They looked a lot better than I thought they would. A lot of people didn't give them any chance against the Crimson Tide. Alabama certainly didn't help themselves with the penalties, but Texas held up on defense. They looked really good on defense, even outside of that last drive, and that was the one time they didn't look great. But outside of that, defensively, Texas has been great this year. I know Texas
at home, they lost NC State
last week. Didn't look terrible in that loss. I just think that Texas has a lot of talent that's finally kind of come into their own. The running game is ridiculous. Robinson is just incredible. He's really been finding his stride. He had a great week last week against UTSA. And Xavier Worthy is also a really talented wide receiver. Once this team gets Quinn Ewers back, they're going to be definitely a serious team to watch in college football, and definitely in the Big 12. I think they should win this weekend. 7-point spread. They should cover that easily. I'm going to go 28-14 as my win. This is going to be a good game for Texas. I think they're going to kind of find their stride and get more and more comfortable as the season goes on, and Sark can start to put together a really strong program in Austin.
The Red Raiders offense didn't look all that great last week. Smith, 58% completion rate, 2 picks, touchdown, 214 yards. And they're high flying against Houston, but he did have 3 interceptions in that one. So Smith's being a little bit of a turnover guy right now. And I do think that the kind of revamped secondary, Deshaun Jameson, Anthony Cook, some of those veterans, Ryan Watts coming over, it's really starting to pay off. Jalen Ford, he's usually a big guy that can be leaned on as a pass rusher on the interior. So I do think they'll find ways to get this off the field. Gary Patterson being there is obviously doing wonders for the Horns. I do see Texas winning this one. The Red Raiders, though, don't be shocked if they compete for 4 quarters and potentially even win. I do like what's going on down there. I think they're putting some good things together with Joey McGuire. Moving to another 3:30 game on ABC, Notre Dame versus the North Carolina Tar Heels. 1.5-point line in favor of UNC, 55.5 over under. This is a game of 2 different tales. One team has a great offense, and North Carolina averages 51.3 points per game with Drake May, who's been elite to start this season. While the Notre Dame offense is 18.3 points per game, they've absolutely been able to do nothing. But they face a defense that has just been awful, Nick. 38 points per game almost for the Tar Heels. They gave up 40 points in the fourth quarter to Appalachian State. Georgia State a couple weeks ago had 400-plus yards, 6.3 yards per play for the Tar Heels. They got the bye last week because, they played week 0. Kimon Rucker, Noah Taylor coming over from Virginia. He's been really good. I like Power Echols. Cedric Gray's had some really good impressive performances. Individually, though, these guys have had some nice performances and efforts, but that doesn't really help because this defense collectively as a group has been pretty poor. Receivers are running wide open. Linebackers can't make tackles on running backs, it seems. 235 against Georgia State, a great running attack. Almost 300 for Appalachian State. And that team was outside of the first quarter. They were down for 3 quarters and still end up with that many rushing yards. That's kind of telling. I don't know what to say about this game, Nick, because it's a tale of 2 opposites. I love Drake May. He's just been elite. I was very excited for him when he was named the starter. Josh Downs, I don't know if he's really played much. I expect him to be back for this game. Notre Dame defense has really carried the load. Downs, he played 1 game so far this year. So he came back. It looks like he can be fully healthy. The Irish defense, I think they've been pretty solid because they've really had to do everything for this football team. They only have about 21 points per contest. I like what they have overall in the front 6. I think it's a very deep defensive line. The most they gave up was 395 to Ohio State. So they're playing a lot of cover 2, and they've been very good. Isaiah Foskey, of course. Jacob Lacey stepping up on the D-line. Biggest thing, though, that you got to remember is they were gashed against Marshall on the ground. They gave up 200-plus yards to the Florida State transfer, Kalon LeBourne. Tore them apart in that game. I'm not really sure what to expect here, Nick. I'm going to pick North Carolina to win it 35-24. This offensive line, led by Jarrett Patterson, is capable of so many things, but Drew Pine, people I think seen the video last week where he was getting grilled by Tommy Reese. Overall, had a pretty good game though. 150 yards, 74%, 2 touchdowns, so he was efficient and was able to get at the guys. Michael Mayer needs to get more involved. Lorenzo Styles as well. They've been trying to get him the football. I don't really know what to expect, Nick. I think that North Carolina, they'll do enough on offense to win this one. 28 points for the Irish offense seems like a bit of a stretch, but they're also playing a terrible defense. So I'm going to go with North Carolina, even though this one's really a toss-up of 2 teams that have been really disappointing, which is crazy to say about UNC because they are 3-0. But the way they've gotten there has been very underwhelming.
This is such a weird matchup when you look at the stats. I mean, points allowed per game for UNC, 37.7. Points scored per game for UNC, 51.3. And you look at Notre Dame, they scored 18.3 points per game and allowed 21.3. These 2 teams are just so weird with the way that they've been playing this year. Gene Chizik leaves SEC Network and joins UNC to be the defensive coordinator, and somehow the defense has gotten worse under him. I didn't think that was even possible. I saw the warning flags when they gave up 24 points to Florida A&M. They shouldn't have given up that many points. And, of course, App State giving up 61 at App State is just a ridiculous thing to see. 28 at Georgia State last week, too. This defense is atrocious. I don't know what to expect out of them. But this Notre Dame offense is not very good either. Styles has really been kind of leading the way for Notre Dame. Without him, I don't know where they would be. They already have 2 losses this season, but they certainly might have lost a 3rd without Styles against Cal last week. This is going to be an interesting game. Notre Dame is not having the season that those fans in South Bend are certainly hoping for. Marcus Freeman and company are really struggling. Certainly quarterback play has not helped, losing their starting quarterback. And UNC, I think, will win this game just because Drake May is an incredible quarterback. Already 930 yards on the season, 11 touchdowns and interception. Drake May, former Alabama commit who decommitted and went to UNC, has worked out perfectly for him. He's an absolute star in the ACC. I love watching him every single week. I'm going to take North Carolina in this game 35-25. I think Notre Dame will score some points, but I just think North Carolina has too much talent at the end of the day, and they're going to outscore them. But the Fighting Irish, they got a lot to figure out in the offseason because this looks to be a wasted season in South Bend.
James Tyree, only 109 yards. He's not really gotten involved. They've not been utilizing that speed. Audric Estime, I didn't really know who he was before the season even started. He's their leading rusher, but only 3.5 yards per attempt. It's definitely been very interesting. I think the biggest thing is Marcus Freeman's really struggling to make adjustments. I mean, 3 games into the year, lose to Marshall, struggle against Cal, and they almost tied it up with a Hail Mary, which is kind of odd because they didn't look bad against Ohio State. But I think Phil Longo, this offense is going to do too many things that, mess with this defense, and Freeman's really struggled to make adjustments. So I do think the experience of Longo with what he's got on offense is certainly going to be something to watch. I think this defense will get a little overwhelmed. North Carolina is the pick for me. Well, yeah, 4 o'clock on Fox. Oregon takes on Washington State on the road. The Ducks high flying off a win over BYU, a big one, 21-point victory over a top 15 BYU team. Scored 70 in week 2, taking out some frustration on Eastern Washington after getting absolutely manhandled by Georgia. 46-point loss there in the opener. I'd say Dan Lanning's done a pretty good job with his team this month, considering how they started it compared to how they are now. A few days after a big win over BYU, looked really good on the ground. Bo Nix had 3 rushing touchdowns. 216 yards rushing. They were throwing the ball as well, making plays. Bo Nix really bouncing back after, struggling effort against Georgia. 222 yards. He had 2 touchdowns, threw for 222 yards, 72% comp rate. He did have those 3 rushing touchdowns. So Bo Nix certainly bounced back. Got to give credit to this offense. Got guys like Alex Forsythe and TJ Bass up front leading the way. They're getting a handful of guys involved on the ground. Marquise Irving, of course, the Minnesota transfer. Noah Whittington, the Western Kentucky transfer. They still have a great talent at wide receiver, too, Nick, left over from Mario Cristobal, Terrence Ferguson, Troy Franklin, Dante Thornton. Chase Cota comes over from UCLA. So they do have talented pass catchers. Overall, this is a very solid offense for Kenny Dillingham to work with. They're facing Washington State defense, though. This is incredibly underrated. Coming into the year, talking about how much talent they had. And they've been lighting it up. 30 tackles for loss as a team. That's one of the nation's highest marks. Deion Henley at linebacker. He's got 7.5 already. Brendan Jackson was one of those guys I talked about. And, this doesn't even include Ron Stone, who has been very quiet, who was a first-team all-conference player last year. This is a team I talked about coming into the year. They had a lot of depth, mainly in the front 7. Quinn Roth, another one of those guys off the edge. These guys have been very impressive, Nick. Only 12.5 points per game allowed. They were very good against Wisconsin, which I don't think is any fluke. Obviously, that's a very one-dimensional team. But they held them in check, running the ball, only 174 yards on the ground. It's a pretty good mark to go into Madison to hold them to. They did allow 400 yards total, but, they were able to get off the field, only limited them to 14 points. I think this Washington State defense is a unit that really is not getting enough love. See 2 for 11 on third down on defense against Wisconsin. That's a phenomenal effort right there. Cam Ward, of course, he comes over from Incarnate Word, reunites with Eric Morris, who's his head coach and play caller there. He's now the OC at Wazoo. 727 yards, 8 touchdowns. He does have 3 picks, but he has great command of this offense. It's an area attack. They got plenty of veterans at wide receiver, guys like Donovan Ali, Dejon Stribling. They've really stepped up. That doesn't include guys like Renard Bell and Lincoln Victor. They're also seniors that have not gotten a lot of touches this year. And I like Nakia Watson out of the backfield. This is a very veteran offense. The same thing can be said about their offensive line. I think they're going to win this game. They're 3-0 right now. Obviously, it's been a little interesting start to get here. Struggled against Idaho, but they did beat Wisconsin on the road, and they had no problems with Colorado State last week. Oregon, I think they're coming off there's a high energy win, kind of an emotional win considering how they got badly beaten by Georgia. I think they're going to be, playing with a lot of confidence, but in college football, one thing it's hard to do is play week to week with emotions when you're, beating teams like that, how they did and how they were able to bounce back. I think it's going to catch up to them here on the Palouse. I see Washington State beating Oregon here. I think 31-28 is going to be the score. I do think it'll be close, but I think this defense is very underrated. I think they'll get off the field. They're going to make a lot of plays, and it's going to have this offense in long, second and third down situations. I think Washington State will be pretty one-dimensional. I do like Brandon Dorless, guys like DJ Johnson, Justin Flo, and then, Noah Sewell to slow down this running game. But overall, I think a lot of people are going to be very high on Oregon. They're not going to see this upset coming. I do see the Cougars winning. How do you see this one going?
I am going to take Oregon in this game, but I think this is going to be a lot closer than a lot of people expect. Oregon has really bounced back from the absolute demolition job in Atlanta against Georgia. Bo Nix looking a lot better than I thought he would. He only has the 2 interceptions in that Georgia game. He's really recovered from that. Solid 7 touchdowns for him. Cam Ward as well for Wazoo. Really impressed with him coming up from the FCS level. He's been really solid. 2 great quarterbacks in this matchup here. I do think Oregon's gonna win this game just because I think they have enough talent on offense. I know this Washington State defense is fantastic. I know they stonewalled Wisconsin, which isn't saying much, but still, that's a tough team to play on the road. I just think that Oregon has enough. I think Bo Nix will be able to be creative enough to get something go. I think Franklin's also a super talented wide receiver. Like to see him have a good day. Irving as well carrying the ball. He should get a couple good carries here from me. This one's gonna be close. I think Washington State will cover the 6.5-point spread, but I think this is gonna be a close game. I'm gonna take Oregon to win 28-24. This is one to watch for sure, though. Underrated matchup this week. This could go either way. It's a toss-up for me, but right now I'm leaning towards Oregon after the absolute demolition job they put on BYU last week.
They did give up 305 yards to BYU through the air, 440 to Georgia. They allowed a 70% completion rate in both of those games. The passing numbers have not been phenomenal. They do get back Bennett Williams, who I like, Jamal Hill as well. Have not really been gelling together so far. And obviously, BYU is down in that game. They're still very efficient. But I think the biggest thing for BYU is they're just getting demolished on defense. So the offense was certainly clicking for them. So I'm going to take Wazoo in this one. I think it's a very underrated team. They'll definitely join the top 25 with a victory there. That'd be 2 ranked wins to start the season. It's going to take us to Arlington, 7 Eastern time. Ranked matchup between Arkansas and Texas A&M. Big opportunity to bounce back. The Aggies' offensive line, they did replace 2 guys on that left side, but they've been very, disappointing. They had a handful of guys last year like Bryce Foster, Ruben Fathery, guys that were on the all-conference freshman team or on one of the teams, anyways, but they've not been running the ball at all, Nick. This is one thing we keep talking about, 105 yards per game. Devon A. Chain's not been very efficient. He's got plenty of speed. They just need to make a hole for him. They've just not been able to do it. And you look at the defensive side of the ball, of course, they're incredibly deep on the D-line in terms of what they've been able to do with recruiting. But outside of Shamar Turner, there's no one else you really feel confident about. I do like Chris Russell, how he stepped up at linebacker next to Edgar and Cooper. Love the secondary of Damani Richardson, Tyreek Chappell. But I think the biggest thing here is how will they defend the run? They weren't all that great against Miami. They allowed 175 yards, almost 5 yards per attempt, and now they're facing one of the top offense, in terms of top rushing offenses in college football. KJ Jefferson's been very efficient through the air as well. Guys like Matt Landers, Jaden Howell, the 2 transfers are stepping up. But I think the biggest thing that needs to be worried, people should be worried about Arkansas is because their biggest weaknesses for the most part was kind of the passing game last year. The secondary, which has been flat out awful. Just kind of, I assumed it would be pretty bad this year, but they're dead last right now, and that's certainly a concern now that Jalen Catalon is gone. Now you have to face Anais Smith. He's really the only threat you got to worry about, though. So I do think they'll pay special attention to him. They'll be all right downfield. But another thing that was a worry was their pass rush for Arkansas. The guys like Dominic has stepped up. Drew Sanders coming over from Arkansas. He's been great. I figured he was going to be a good player coming over from Alabama due to his athleticism. I thought that they would generate some pass rush from him. 6 tackles for loss. He's got some forced fumbles. He got 5 sacks, 27 tackles. He's up there a bumper pull for the team high. And then back to Jordan Dominic. He stepped up with 4.5 tackles for loss. That was one of their weaknesses from last year. They're really starting to get better production. I believe they lead the nation in sacks, actually, with 17 right now. So this is something you really have to work out for because Drew Sanders has showed up and he's absolutely changed this defense tremendously. His speed, his athleticism, his playmaking has been so good. Kind of like we figured it would be, but I think this has been very impressive from him. I have Arkansas winning this game. I think that him, KJ Jefferson, Raheem Sanders will do enough running the ball. The Arkansas front 6, they're going to really step up. The secondary is obviously a big concern. I'm not a fan of them one bit. I wasn't coming into the preseason, but I don't see them getting really tested here. So I do think that 23-17 is the pick for me. I picked the Hogs to win this game last year. I'm going to pick them to do it again, and I think the analysis is pretty cut and clear on why. But I would not be shocked if the Aggies, who are only allowing 8.7 points per game, make this a dogfight, force a few turnovers to win this game. But I think if Arkansas is clean with the football, don't get beat downfield, they got this one in the bag.
I'm also taking Arkansas this week. I think KJ Jefferson and Sanders together are just so strong on offense. I really just think that Texas A&M just really hasn't shown me enough on offense to consider that they're going to win this game. I know that the secondary is terrible for Arkansas. I totally agree with that, but I think Drew Sanders and Bumper pulled together that combo, that linebacking duo is one of the best in the nation. Those guys are going to absolutely stuff the run. A&M's going to have no chance to run the ball this week in Jerry World. A-Chain just really hasn't had any opportunity to pick up any ground game, and he's going to be stuffed again on Saturday. Another frustrating game for him on the ground. I like Jefferson here to lead this game. I like the passing attack. Landers, solid wide receiver. Like the team get a touchdown this week. I'm going to take Arkansas. It's a pretty easy pick for me, 24-20. It's going to be a close game. I think A&M has a chance, but I think Arkansas will pull away late. It'll be close in the fourth quarter. I just love Jefferson's ability to manage the game late in the game. I think he's going to put together a great drive to win this game for Arkansas.
And then looking at the nightcap on ABC, Ohio State hosts Wisconsin. And last year I was very interested. I wish this game would have happened because if they were as soft as they were a season ago on defense, that is the Buckeyes, they would have gotten ran all over by Braylon Allen, Ches Malusi. Obviously, that's still kind of the expectation here is that how will this defense perform? Because I thought they looked pretty good against Notre Dame week 1, but now that you're seeing the Irish offense, maybe that was a little premature. Michael Hall has stepped up immensely, 5 tackles for loss in only 2 games. Tommy Eichenberg, he was great against the Irish. He's really starting to step up and come into his own there. Jack Sawyer's got unleashed a bit coming off the edge. So, that's going to be the key, and that's what we're going to watch. Javonte Jean-Baptiste as well, another one of those guys that, didn't really hear much from last year. They're starting to get involved. I think that's good for this defense. There you go, though. They're going to face Malusi and Allen, 218 yards per game so far on the ground. They weren't all that great against Washington State, we just talked about. And then the one-dimensional part of this offense, that's why this line's at 19, because the offense is very one-dimensional. Graham Mertz, was completing 71%, but, they didn't really do all that much against the Cougars. Completed 58%. Was not able to convert on third down. That's the biggest problem for them. And it's the same old every year with Wisconsin. Chamari Dyke, though, he's really stepped up at receiver. Skylar Bella, freshman. Clay Cundiff as well. Those are the 3 guys that really stepped up, and those guys have been pretty highly productive all across the board. I think that's been very impressive from them. Keon says Lewis, he's been a big playmaker. How will they do against the secondary? It's kind of a revamped unit, 4-2-5 with Jim Knowles coming over. Denzel Burke's already got 4 pass breakups, and he's been kind of the lone standout there in the secondary. Lathan Ransom, though, I like what he's been able to do. Ronnie Hickman, he's got 9 tackles, which is 5th on the team so far. So very talented defense for Ohio State. It's an opportunity for them to show up. And then you look at the Buckeyes offense, C.J. Stroud quietly been great this season, 73%, 11 touchdowns, no picks, 941 yards. They've did all this for the most part without Jackson Smith-Njigba, who was injured. He's only got 4 grabs on the season. Marvin Harrison, Kamika Umukba, both have 320-plus yards. They both have a combined 8 touchdowns. That's bad news for opponents, Nick, because these guys, they're expected to step up, but they're getting a lot of valuable playing time as JSN returns from a hamstring injury. And they're pretty angry. 482 yards through the air, 77 points on Toledo. They're starting to click, fire on all cylinders. They've doubled the points total in every single week. Week 1, 21, 45 the next, 77 here. So that makes you think they're probably going to score about 100-plus points here on Wisconsin. Do you see that happening?
This is going to be a great game for Ohio State.
With ease, they should be firing on
All cylinders. C.J. Stroud, I don't think he's getting enough attention, honestly. I mean, the stats are ridiculous. 62 of 85, 941 yards and 11 touchdowns, and it seems like no one's talking about him. He should win the Heisman this year if he continues to produce that number. He's missing his top wide receiver and still producing the type of number. JSN, hopefully back this week. The game's a lot better when he's playing. I love watching him play. If he's back, expect him to get a lot of touches. He needs to kind of ramp that up if he's fully healthy. This offense seems to be humming and hawing. They're fantastic, and this Wisconsin team just is not great on offense. They're one-dimensional. They run the ball great. Certainly Allen leading the charge with 50 carries, 332 yards, and 5 touchdowns. But I just think this defense for Ohio State has improved, which is something we really hit on. They haven't played the caliber of offense that I really want to see them play to kind of get a full read on them. Toledo, Arkansas State, Notre Dame, these aren't great offenses. But I think Ohio State's defense really has kind of turned the corner under Jim Knowles. He's really kind of building that system. That 4-2-5 is working in Columbus. This Ohio State team is scary. They're definitely going to be playoff contenders, easily contenders to the national championship, look a lot better on defense, and I think they'll have a great day against Wisconsin. I don't see the Badgers being able to do much of anything at all. It's going to be loud in Columbus. The crowd's going to be excited. This is a nice game at night. I expect Ohio State to run away winners. 44-20 is definitely an easy score line for me. It should be an easy game for Ohio State. A couple maybe late garbage time touchdowns for Wisconsin. But, man, Ohio State on offense look fantastic. And the defense, as long as the defense stays like this team is a real contender.
Yeah, you read my mind. I was thinking 45-20, so we're pretty on par there. Last time they played in Columbus, they got clobbered 38-7. I really think that Wisconsin can cover in this game to get the ground game going. Ohio State will be in trouble because they're going to control the clock. This defense, with guys like Nick Herbig, Keanu Benton, they're more than capable. I guess we didn't even talk about the Badger defense, because that's one thing, 8 points per game allowed so far. They're going to be great as always. They got a veteran secondary, John Torchio, Jay Shaw comes over. Some very good playmakers here. Rodas Johnson stepping up the other edge rushing spot. CJ Gotez, outside linebacker. I was very excited to see what he does as a senior this season. So this is a defense that's plenty capable. So if the Badgers are running the ball like they're certainly capable of doing against the defense that last year could not stop the run to save their life, if it's much of the same as last year, Wisconsin could be in the driver's seat to win this game because they will certainly control the clock, and that defense will be playing with a lot of energy. And that's going to be scary for Ohio State. So obviously we're picking the Buckeyes to cover, but I don't think we should be too fast on this one because Wisconsin, these guys can certainly play. Paul Chryst has a great ball squad. I think it's exactly where they want to be, too. It's overlooked and doubted like this. I do think the Buckeyes will cover. But I'm just telling you, those are things to watch for, and if that starts to happen, the Buckeyes will be in trouble, and I do think they will lose this game if they give up 250 yards rushing. Would you agree with that?
I think it's possible. I think that the Badgers can have a good game on the ground. I think they have some serious talent in the running game, but I think that the offense will just absolutely outweigh the talent on Wisconsin. They can just put up a ton of points. But this game could potentially be a lot closer than I think a lot of people are expecting. I know we both agreed that they'd win by 25 points, but there's some potential to be a little bit closer if things go well for Wisconsin and that defense makes some mistakes early on for Ohio State.
That's it for today's episode, guys. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. See you, Kansas fans, when you're 4-0 on Monday or Sunday or whenever. As always, Nick, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, Rutgers, Iowa this weekend, another interesting game. Rutgers scoring a lot of points. I think they can win at home against Iowa and cement themselves at 4-0 and make a big move in the Big Ten.
Go Scarlet Knights. That's going to be it. See you guys next time.